And today I'm with Jennifer Cuevas, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and also an advocate for children. And Jennifer has been working very closely with parents of New York State, New York City Department of Education, parochial school parents, and parents of charter schools. So we are going to talk today about the stresses of going back to school post-COVID and what we can do as parents to help our kids and to advocate our kids. But first, we're going to roll our introduction.
Got on my leather jacket thriller. The show ain't nothing iller. Man, I'm a lady killer. If I want her, I'ma steal her. I promise I can make her fly away like caterpillars. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
So we have a lot to get familiar with today. Welcome, Jen. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, we're really excited to speak to you. And before we get rocking and rolling, I want to remind everybody 439 days until Bill de Blasio is out of office. I am going to keep an official countdown the same way he does on his desk when he lectures to us about, voting and everything else. You should vote. And we have an election next year, and we have an election this year on November 4th, and you should get out to vote. Just for people to know, on October 24th, early voting starts, and you will have to get hold of your Board of Elections to find out where your polling site is for early voting. And I recommend that you do it because this is an election that people are really excited about. And so that you don't get discouraged or don't have to wait in long lines. Take a look at the Board of Elections website, and you can start from October 24th and go right up to almost November 3rd in New York State. So everybody get out to vote. But for Bill de Blasio, he only has 439 more days, and thank God for all of us. So enough of politics. Now it comes to our kids. So Jen is I said it before, licensed clinical psychologist,
Social worker.
Social worker. And your job is to help parents and children and to advocate on behalf of children, correct?
Mm-hmm.
To tell, and you're a contributor to WABC and to NEWSMAX, so you're famous and your advice is out there. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in this, and what's going on.
Actually, I wanted to be an attorney many moons ago. And it was during that time that I started taking some law classes that I decided I wanted to go into the field of psychology. So I entered social work. And my first and only love has been working with children. And here we are today.
We are today, and more than ever, I think that we need your services, Jen, because parents are at their wits' end. Kids are stressing out. It's really getting to be a lot of pressure. I want to just, before we go on, Timothy Simmons is joining us now, but I want everybody to remember to please like and share. If you're watching on YouTube, like the page. If you're watching on Facebook, please down below, there's a share button. Share, bring your friends in on the conversation. Certainly you can watch it later, but there's no time like live because you can actually ask your questions. And right now, Timothy Simmons says, keep the pressure on the fake bug. Oh, okay, the fake bug meaning coronavirus. Well, I don't know. What do you think about that, Jen? I mean, with kids, we know that they're contracting it at less of a rate than adults, but I know that it's real, Tim, because I had it. But I don't know that it's as terrifying as people make it out to be. But Jen, how are you seeing a lot of children coming down with COVID in your travels?
I have not. I have lost family members, elderly family members, unfortunately, to COVID. However, it's in the last 7 months, we're seeing that it's not a disease that affects children dramatically. So while I think it is very real, I'm not so sure that it is so devastating to children that we have to put them now in this new public health crisis of education.
Well, talk a little bit about that, Jen. You're calling for the lack of education and the stress on kids to be actually named or deemed a public health crisis.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that? What's happening? What are you seeing with children?
Well, with children, I am treating children in a private practice. I am the mother of a child with autism. And in doing media, I have tons of people, messaging me, reaching out to me, telling me their story. And I always invite that. So, I extend that to your audience. Please reach out to me. What I'm seeing is that children are suffering. It's nothing short of suffering. The hybrid model, the remote model of education will never work. And I think we all know now, 7 months later, why and how it won't work. But I do want to sort of make a shout out to two categories of children that I think are suffering the most. That would be your children that are living within low socioeconomic means, children that are homeless. We're finding a lot of these children in your New York City communities, and our kiddos with special needs. They are not being educated and they are not receiving the social emotional education that was just as important as the academics. So they are suffering.
So I think that for me, I'm seeing a lot of parents stressing out about being able to work with their kids in the time frame and getting the schoolwork done. And I see the parents stressing, which is causing the children to stress. And you can almost see it, you can almost feel it right through the pages of social media that there are moms and dads at home that are getting up in the morning and fighting with little Johnny that you have to sit in front of that computer, you have to get your work done because if you don't you're going to fail, and little Johnny is saying my eyes hurt, mom, and they're not able to connect in the same way and learn in the same way
Right.
as they would if they had a teacher in front of them. And mom and dad who only want the best for their kids are so frustrated because they're not teachers, right? Where they want to make sure their children have the best possible education, but they get worried and frustrated themselves. What would you say to these parents about how what do you do with little Johnny when he says, "I just can't anymore, mom. My brain doesn't want to let me work." What would you say?
If you don't mind, I would like to address the parents first
Yeah,
and then answer that
yeah.
question. There's a very real phenomenon happening now. It's a psychological term called mom guilt. And Jen calls it mom and dad guilt because there are so many dads on the front line nowadays. That is a phenomenon of when parents are spread so thin that they're not giving a big percentage of themselves to anything or anybody, including their children. And when it comes to their children, they tend to feel very, very guilty about that. But times have changed now, and I want to tell parents that even when you think you're having a bad day trying to give to your children and educate them and facilitate their lives, you are doing a good job. Everybody is struggling to do the best that they can.
Yeah, I agree with that, and you're so right. I mean, we know that as parents we want to do everything we possibly can for our kids, but you know what? There's a time to chill, and it's okay, right, Jen? I mean, if little Johnny or little Susie are in front of that computer and they're like, "Mommy, my brain hurts. I can't do this. I just want to, I just want to relax, or I want to hug, or I want to whatever." It's okay to let them take that break, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. They need to take breaks. They need to take breaks from the computer on their remote days. It's not healthy to be in front of a computer for 6 hours. And sadly, as hard as I think a lot of teachers are trying, you also have your teachers that are sort of leaving kids up to their own devices in front of the computer screen, sort of having them, the teacher will check in, throw them their assignment, and then the teacher checks in an hour later. I'm
Right.
hearing those stories as well.
Yeah, parents, if that's happening, please share those stories with us. I just want Timothy Simmons. He didn't correct. He elaborated on a statement saying many are the cases, few are the caskets with coronavirus. And thankfully, I think that we're seeing that now. I think that if you look at the numbers throughout the world, you'll see that all of the death cases are coming down dramatically. And thank God for that. And I think that and look, I'm not a doctor, but I did have a very special needs child. And so I spent many a time in the doctor's office, and I've learned a couple of things about health and welfare. And the one thing that we didn't know was what this virus was and what it did. We thought it was a respiratory virus in the beginning. Now we're learning that it's not. And we're learning what kills people. It wasn't that they needed to be on respirators so much. It was their immune system was overreacting. So now when you catch it early and you treat it with the antibiotics, for most people, they will recover. But there are still some that, will succumb to it, and that's unfortunate. But I agree with you, Tim. So we've established in this program that COVID is true because we've had it and we've lost loved ones from it, but that over time we're learning how to deal with it. And that's a good thing. And we're learning from each other around the world. But let's get back to education now and child advocacy. And so for those parents, Jen, that are just their children are not getting enough out of remote learning or distance learning or blended learning or whatever you want to call it. What can parents do to keep their children engaged in education in maybe a different way? Maybe it's not so much sitting in front of the computer. What could they do with this time when they're home with their kids to help their children be ready to become an adult?
You know, my own son, Jesse, we pulled him out of public school and we have him on homeschooling now. I'm not the teacher. I was blessed enough that I could retain a special ed teacher to come to us each day and work with him. But I am taking this time now to teach him life lessons, to teach him daily living skills, teaching him virtues. One thing that I like to do with Jesse, and it's working out nicely, is we have a jar. And 4 days a week, Jesse goes into the jar and picks out a piece of paper. And on those papers are the words either courage, skills, kindness, or compassion. And those are the 4 virtues we are working on. And whatever ticket, so to speak, that he picks out is an activity that we do for that day. So one of the things that we've done so far is under the word kindness was we brought our local precinct a coffee setup and donuts. I don't think they knew what to make of us when we when we walked in with all those bags of goodies. But when I explained it, they then were just so sweet, and they offered to give Jesse a tour of the precinct. And so I to answer your question, I think that this is the time that we can teach them about the real life skills that they're going to be using. Because quite frankly, Letitia, I don't remember the last time somebody asked me to use calculus.
That's the truth. And in some schools, they are actually teaching calculus, but in so many schools, more social issues are taking the place of the basic reading, writing, arithmetic. It's crazy. But I love what you just said. Taking Jesse to the local precinct with the coffee setup to say thank you and to be kind, especially to, in these times when we have such hostility going on out there. Wouldn't it be amazing if parents did those little school trips themselves? And could you imagine a child if you brought them to a firehouse, let's say, or to a hospital, or to maybe a senior center, and had them interact with people who are serving them daily? It's a wonderful idea of how to show them that this could be their career path, but this is who's in your community helping you. And it must have been thrilling for Jesse that he got a tour.
It was thrilling for me. I was so overjoyed to see all of our beautiful, wonderful police men and women just enjoying the moment and having a cup of coffee on us and a donut, and they invited us to share in that moment with them. It brought me joy, and it brought my son joy.
Yeah.
And I encourage, all parents, when you have time, because I know not everybody has the luxury of time, and I know I'm doing it 4 days a week, this sort of lesson, but even if you can do it once a month, if you can, especially with the holidays coming up. Just another suggestion. My son, he's researching the food shelters around our community. And so we're going to start doing weekly food shopping for the food shelters. We've adopted a family for Thanksgiving. There's so much with the holidays. All you have to do is go on Facebook and you can find these opportunities.
Well, that's a fantastic idea, because I think that one of the things that I'm seeing in some of the parents is the frustration that they're having is not necessarily just related to education in their children. It's balancing their job now, working from home. It's the fear of COVID. It's, all of the pressures that are on all of us. And what a wonderful way to decompress a little bit and to feel like you're doing something. I think that the thing for me when COVID first struck was you don't want to criticize the way people are handling anything. And so I tried to sit back and help where I could, even when I saw things that I thought, maybe might not have been fantastic. So in the first weeks of COVID, I tried to shut my mouth and just lend a hand where I could. And I cooked for some of the homeless. And for me, that made me feel like I was doing something positive to help the community. And it made me feel like my hands were involved, even though I was powerless. And that's what I felt. I felt helpless and I felt powerless. And those 8 weeks of cooking for a homeless shelter, really, it made me feel so much better. It was hard work, but it made me feel so much better. I can imagine how that would feel for a young kid that is, a little overstressed and not understanding and fearful of COVID and seeing mom and dad stress out. To help out in a homeless shelter, to go shopping and knowing that they're doing a kindness is a very positive thing. That's fantastic, Jen.
And at a time, too, when we have to be so aware more than ever at the state of our children's mental health, because remote learning is I think the pathway into severe depression. Even for kids who may have been very even keeled prior to COVID. So I think that, again, doing these other life lessons will give them purpose, and it could go a long way for their mental health.
And that's great advice. So my mom, our number one fan has joined us, Justine Stazzi. She said, I believe that that's most important, and life lessons, of course. And Paul Esmond said that's a great way to impart virtue. It certainly is, Paul. So for any of you out there that are seeing any signs of stress or have any questions for Jen, you have someone here that is a wealth of knowledge and can help you for free for this next 40 minutes. So you should take advantage of her to get some tips, and also maybe share your own stories, and then maybe she can help. So Jen, here's my story. So my story is that my grandson, um, he had to make a decision about going back to school in this blended learning mode or to stay remote. And we ultimately made the decision on the fact that he had to travel by subway part of the leg of his journey.
Okay.
And he was really afraid. He was frightened because we hear about what's going on with the crime rising and so much going on in the subways. And so it took a little while for him to fess up that he was afraid. But once he did, my daughter said, and his father said, go full mode, it's fine.
Mhm.
And he's a teenager, so he misses his friends. Um, he's been going to hang out with friends in their homes, wearing his mask. It's a certain group of friends, and he sees them on a regular basis, maybe twice or three times a week. It's stuff that he hadn't been able to do before because he was so busy with sports and things like that. Do you see any problem with pods of kids getting together to socialize as long as they're wearing their masks and when they're traveling and whatever? I mean, do you see a benefit in it more than a problem?
I know this question, I get it a lot, and it can be a sticky a sticky question. I often refer back to people need to make a personal choice about that. In my world, what I do is I sort of put together a group of people that I social distance with. And that includes two families. One is my sister and her three children, because one of her children has autism, and Jesse and Jake need each other. And another family that has two boys. So I trust these parents. Most of these parents are working from home. Most of their children are, for the most part, remote at home. And they are as careful as I am when it comes to wearing the mask and following sort of the guidelines. So I think that if you can craft a social distance group that you trust, I mean, it's no guarantee. You can't guarantee anybody's, absolute safeness, but I think that it can be helpful because you how how are we gonna go? If you when you think back to March, were we really gonna go from March through the summer without seeing anybody or anything? And it's not just about socializing. What about the responsibilities we have to our parents, my elderly parents, or my responsibilities sometimes outside of my home? I don't think it's feasible for people to stay home 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So it's a personal choice.
But I think that what you said was very poignant. Depending on who you are, and what you feel is safe for your family. If you find friends or peers or whoever it is in your life that you trust. And if you all start out with this is what we're going to do to keep each other safe, but to let our kids get together. If you start off with a guideline amongst your group and say, this is what we all, if you will, pledge to do so that our kids have that mental health
Mhm,
and
mhm.
that connection to others, that's a great way to handle it. And there are some people probably that would maybe want to go sit in a park and stay 6 feet apart and whatever, and maybe not let the kids touch, but see each other or whatever. Other people who might want to, feel comfortable getting closer. Where I get together on Sundays with a group that we all know each other very well and we all trust each other. And so every Sunday we've been getting together. And some of them are compromised and they feel comfortable, and we know it's our responsibility to keep them safe. But they would have lost their mind if we weren't able to get together every Sunday. And so we have dinner together every Sunday, and we just go to each other's houses. And I think that it has given me at least a sense of connection,
Yes,
connection to my family and
yes.
to my friends. And so I think that the way you said it makes sense. Make it a social contract almost.
Yes, and I think it can further it can further want us to continue to be careful and not fall back into pre-COVID behaviors, because we know that we don't want to lose that group that we've connected with and that we're counting on. Especially, look, we are sort of coming out of the eye of the storm again, and we are seeing some spiking happening. And we're going to have to see where that takes us. But, again, this may be the time, if you don't have a group to social distance with, you may want to put one together. So, and those will generally be people that you really care about. So they may further motivate you to follow reasonable social, distancing measures, to protect everybody and protect your connection. And I want to say something else too. The reason that I kept Jesse back, that I homeschooled him, was not because I was so afraid of him catching COVID within the public school system. I kept him back because I didn't think that he would survive the all of the rigid, borderline inhumane measures that the schools were putting in place. So I want to just make that
Such
very
as, can
clear.
you elaborate on that? Because I think that, yeah, because some parents, I think some parents are ashamed, right? That some parents feel weird, if they don't want their kids to, follow some of these rigid measures. They talk about those.
Mhm. Some of the measures are ridiculous, and some of the measures in some school districts are reasonable. My husband is a public school teacher, and I find that his district on Long Island is considered reasonable. My son's school district on Long Island, they expected my son to sit in a chair with three-sided translucent glass, a mask, all day long from 9 until at least 3 o'clock. No lunch, no specials. If he wanted to get up to use the restroom, he had to have an escort. He was not going to survive this for 6 hours a day. And unfortunately, many of the school districts are like this. And from what I understand, a lot of parents have kept their children back or kept them on full remote or decided to homeschool because they didn't want to deal with the public schools measures. And it did emerge that your child in building education was only going to be as good as their ability to wear the mask. So what I am hearing from many families is that, if their child is not able to tolerate the mask, then they are immediately put on remote learning. I think they give them a little bit of opportunity to learn how to build their
Right.
tolerance to it. If not, bye bye, you're on remote. So that's another sad story we're hearing too.
Yeah,
Is
I think that it's, you know, now more than ever, we need good principals. And when I say principals, I mean the ones that lead the schools, not the moral principals. But I think that we have taken principals for granted for a very long time and not recognized that the principals do have some control over the school and they can actually work deals with the teachers and with the teachers union and with the mayor and whatever, or where, in some places the county. So would you recommend that parents be more interactive with their principals, if they're not happy with what's going on, instead of trying to make these big grand stands? And we've seen it, right? Because we're both in Facebook groups with lots of parents that are they have children in the education system, and they're all very frustrated and they're all very angry and they want to do rallies and they want to do protests. But don't you agree that the first stop should be the principal?
Yes, and there is a hierarchy in the school, in the public school system. Your first stop does have to be the principal, but ultimately the decision goes to the superintendent. So you really want to work your way in that direction. Um, a lot of people have been trying to, put together protests against, Cuomo's reopening measures. However, protests are not going to work. What on the larger scale. Cuomo is not changing anything about his reopening rules, and that is the way it is right now. Where the protesting should be done, whether it's quiet protesting or you're outright holding signs out outside of a school, is within your own school district, because at the end of the day, the school district has the power to craft the reopening plan and make it as rigid or as unrigid as they want to. There's a story right now that just came out on the news yesterday from WABC. Smithtown School District on Long Island. Apparently, the parents are advocating now to have the school district open up 5 days a week. Many school districts have open 5 days a week because in person learning, because we've been doing so well with containing COVID. Apparently, the superintendent, Mark Secor, he sent out a letter to the parents stating that it was not feasible to open up to 5 days a week in building due to new guidance from the state saying that the entire building would need to close down if somebody was diagnosed with COVID. And that's not the case. And the reporter, she checked everything out. Suffolk County did not send a memo with updated information stating that that had to be the case. So it's districts like Smithtown, what they're going through right now. We want to get behind them to protest. You should be holding your signs outside and marching around the building, protesting that you want 5 days a week, because from the phase layout that they gave us, we are in the phase where we can open 5 days since we're doing so well. So it's the individual school districts that you sort of have to tackle right now. And what I am finding is that as the parents protest the individual school districts, they're getting what they want. So Smithtown, if you guys are listening, I'm behind you. I will hold that protest sign with you, and we'll try to get you open 5 days.
Yeah, well, I'll do it. Yeah. So my mom wants to know, do you think young children understand what is going on with the virus and why they have to wear the mask?
I do. You know who I don't think understands? I think our special needs population. I think they are the ones who are struggling to really understand it. And look, the explanation about what's going on, will be as understandable as the parent makes it. And unfortunately, the school districts are making it part of their curriculum to teach it as well. Very sad, but that's what they are doing.
So, Paul Esmond has a long statement. I have a boy who is about to turn 4. Uh, he is on the spectrum and is doing okay in some ways, but not in others. He is in a wonderful school in Rensselaer County, but unfortunately, his classroom has been cut to 2 days a week. We have a 5-month-old, and we wanted him to spend as much time with my wife, so we put my older boy into daycare for 2 days a week. It's stressful for him, not to mention expensive for us. He doesn't know why. His daycare doesn't mask him, and we're happy for that. And then, Paul, you started to type something else, but it's gone. So his daycare doesn't mask him, and that I think is a good thing, right? I mean, they have a protocol,
Mhm.
and it's probably helpful for somebody on the spectrum.
Daycares are not required to use the masks, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe that children 2 and under are not mandated to wear masks. But
He's
look,
four. He's 4 years
Paul, it's Paul. Paul,
Paul.
I understand though. I'm the mom of a spectrum child, and I understand how um, you want to get him out a little bit, and that it's good for you to have a break from him, especially with having an infant at home. And it's the socialization for your child won't hurt either, even though it sounds like the children may be a little bit younger than he is. It's okay. I think you're needing to hear that it's okay. And I'm telling you, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. And Paul elaborated, we want them to see his face. The daycare wants to see his face. And
Right.
that makes sense, right? Because you need to understand if someone's in distress, if they're happy, if they're sad. I mean, and I think that that's what we're losing with these masks. We don't see those facial expressions anymore. Which I want to move to asking you this. So while young kids, especially those who are special needs, may not enjoy the mask and we may actually have difficulty keeping them masked.
Mhm.
Um, maybe playing a game is a good idea. Telling them that it's like a Halloween costume or something like that might be helpful. But to I think certain children, depending on what their special need is, it still may be difficult. But let's move to 13 and 14-year-old and 11-year-old and
Mhm.
12-year-old with the zits and a very awkward stage of life.
Mhm.
Um, are you finding they're taking to masks more? Yeah, Jen, are they having a less hard time?
I'll tell you, I think they are, and I'll tell you why. Because they don't want to be home. So that group is more willing to make the sacrifice. They don't like it, but they're willing to tolerate it because of what they experienced in the quarantine. They don't want that again.
Yeah,
So my understanding from middle school age to high school is doing okay with the masks. It's more the little ones that we're concerned about.
yeah, yeah. My grandson doesn't mind it at all. He's got a cool one. It's like a neckerchief, and he pulls it up, and so he keeps it on all the time. I just always wonder, though. I was an awkward teenager. I was fat. I had kinky hair. I was not the most popular. So I used to dress severely, very dark and very, I guess, goth, because I wanted to kind of hide in my own skin. And ultimately, it took me a while to grow out of it. I was well into adulthood by the time I did. But the one thing I wonder is these masks. Well, if kids are hiding behind them, if awkward teenagers are hiding behind them, will they have this a sense of security being behind it? And then if it's time to unmask, will that be traumatic for them? I mean, these are the things that I think about long term.
That's an excellent question. I honestly haven't thought about that, but I think that yes, the mask could serve as something to hide behind, sort of like a girl's long hair. They hide behind that.
Right.
Yeah, I think the mask could be a little bit of a security blanket. But I'm also concerned about, I have to say, the wearing the mask for long periods of time. I'm not so convinced that there aren't going to be health issues from that. I know for myself, when I do my food shopping or whatever, if I wear that mask for longer than 1 hour, I'm starting to feel panicked. I'm starting to feel anxiety, and the fight or flight response kicks in. So, I really am concerned about people wearing them for long periods of time without, taking these breaks.
Right.
So yeah, I think, if we had to make lemonade out of the lemons of math, we could maybe, but I am so unhappy about them. But yet I do believe that they are necessary at this time.
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, here's the thing. I think that we're China wears them all the time. It's kind of part of their culture now because the air is polluted and there's so many people, and so it's so easy to get sick. And it just makes sense, right? If you're not exposed to someone else's bacteria or viruses or whatever, you're going to stay healthier. Um, there's probably going to be a long-term ramification for it somewhere down the line that we don't know about, that nobody is studying. But they're coming up with so many inventive ways to wear a mask. I actually bought a set of, they were clear glasses and it had a face shield, so it never touches your face. You put them on like sunglasses. They fold up, and it covers that much. And I had them all of one day before my friend saw it and said, "Oh, my mom is really sick and she has to go back and forth to the hospital. Where did you get those? We want them." And so I gave them all to him, and they all three wear them to go to the hospital. But he said it was a godsend because it doesn't stop, it doesn't panic her. It's like wearing, glasses and they don't fog up. And I'm glad for it. And I'm glad that there's so many different options out there. I'm not going to criticize those people that don't want to wear a mask. I get it. I think that we all have to come to our own decisions. I mean, I have antibodies still after March, and I know that I'm not going to get sick, but I wear a mask so somebody else doesn't get nervous.
And I think it's important to not assume if somebody's not I'm sorry, it's important not to if somebody is not wearing a mask, if you see somebody not wearing a mask, don't assume that it's because they don't want to. There's a whole medical community of people that can't wear it. You have severe asthmatics. I mean, the list goes on. So for the people out there who feel it's okay to comment on somebody while you're standing online at Stop and Shop about their not wearing a mask, think before you speak. There may be a reason, and who are you to judge that person without having all the information?
But I'm glad you went there. I'm just going to read Paul's comment. Paul says, "I think we're going to have a lot of sinusitis cases this year, based on wearing the mask for a long time." You're probably right, Paul. But let's go to what you just said, Jen. So we're seeing people out there, arguing with people, put on the mask. Like sanctimonious people yelling at people. We've seen, I think, online, we've seen fist fights in stores because somebody won't put on a mask. So, do you think that is a side effect of just the stress of COVID, or do you think that our society has now gotten to this point where we feel like we're right and we're egocentric and we're going to just tell you what we feel, whether you want to hear it or not, and we're going to push you to do things. I mean, I read Facebook and Twitter, and it's just terrible, some of the stuff that I see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's a mix of things going on. I think people are angry. I think people are frustrated. I think they are anxious. And the mask, I think, is sort of the prop for all of that. I'll be very honest with you and tell you that I'm concerned about my own mother. I think she has become semi-agoraphobic because of COVID. She's 73 years old and she has, some health issues, but is so afraid to leave the house. And she's one of those people that if she does, and she, feels that somebody's standing too close to her or is not wearing a mask, she will comment on it. And I'm always like, oh my, you're going to get yourself punched in the face one of these days. But you know what it is? She's so anxious that that's what comes out of her mouth. Yeah. So I also ask people to maybe give a little slack to some of those who do feel the entitlement to say something. It may not be coming from a place of entitlement. I think it may be coming from a place of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we're seeing it, whether it be in politics or mask wearing or anything else. We're seeing with the news media, each other. we're at each other's throats, and it's terrible. Timothy Simmons has a comment, and I'm not going to read it exactly as he wrote it, because one of the things he did was also go after somebody. He said people do not want to remember that Dr. Fauci was on, so he didn't say doctor, he said something else, was on 60 Minutes a few months ago, telling us that the mask might make you feel safe, but at most it can only stop a droplet. And that's right. That's basically what the masks do. They stop your bacteria from getting into the air and maybe hitting somebody else in a place where they're vulnerable. And what we do know about this virus now is that when it gets in, it attacks a certain lining of your veins, of your skin. I can't remember the name. I think it's Phyllis. And it's all over our body, and so the virus attacks that, and because it's in every part of our body, our immune system overreacts, and when the immune system overreacts, it then causes all kinds of side effects, including encephalitis, which is when you can't breathe and your brain starts to shut down, and you get a body temperature and you spike, and this is very similar to what happened to my son, which ultimately caused his death more than 5 years ago. But it wasn't coronavirus; it was encephalitis that did brain damage to him, and that was because of some of the medications that he was on. But anyway, that's what this virus does. And so, Tim and others who don't think that it's dangerous. For most of us, our immune system won't overreact, right? If you get to the doctor early and you get your medications, you're going to be okay. But like my son, in his case, he had to have human antibodies, put into his system to confuse his immune system and tell it, okay, now there's all kinds of antibodies, floating around. You don't need to make any more. And so it stopped his body from attacking itself. And now we saw with President Trump, Regeneron, which is almost the same exact thing. Your antibodies go in and it stops the overreaction of your body, and it does some other things. By everybody out there, I am not a scientist. I just read about this stuff and I know a little bit of things. But that's our new hope, is putting the antibodies in so that we don't wind up having our immune system attacking something. Why did I get on this subject? I got on this subject.
But look, I do think that we're in a better place under the circumstances than we were in March. So if we do get a second wave, the doctors know better what to do. Nobody knew what they were doing in March, and that's the truth. And I believe that in March, everything that that was done, the close down of the economy, of the world, of the nation, the schools, et cetera, was necessary. I do believe that in my heart. But I think we know better. And, what does Oprah always say? When we know better, we do better. And so I'm not so overly concerned that this second wave that they're talking about may be as horrible as they're projecting.
Right. We might have more cases, but that doesn't necessarily translate into more death. And that's, I think, what all of us are concerned about at the end of the day, is to make sure that the death rate stays down.
Which, and if you're okay with this, I would like to kind of segue back into the education discussion, because what's the end game here? At what point are the school districts going to let up on some of the rigidity of their safety measures? So many of them are so unreasonable. And I really do want to talk about the New York City situation.
Yeah.
What's emerging are two different narratives of what's happening in the suburban setting and what's happening in the urban setting. Here in suburbia where I live, it's your people who are still trying to have sweet 16s and still trying to have these parties that are causing these, what do they call them now, super spreader events. Yeah. But in the city, we're dealing with some hardcore protesting and religious groups that do not believe in any of this and are continuing on as usual. What it's causing to happen is that New York City kiddos and teachers are being tested for COVID with not necessarily the knowledge of the parents of these
Yeah,
children. And they're
yeah,
calling it implied consent, meaning if you agreed to return your child to in-building learning, it's implied that you will allow for the testing. And the testing is that horrendous Q-tip that is being used to collect a sample. Um, and if my understanding at this time is that if the parents don't consent to the testing, that their kids have to go on automatic on remote learning. And just last week, the CDC denounced the unethical and illegal mandatory testing. What happened? I thought that New York was following the CDC. So that's my new investigation this week, is trying to figure out this testing situation with New York City. And little birds are telling me that I know career advocates that this may be moving on to Long Island. So
the testing portion.
yes.
Yeah. Well, I know that I know that the test in New York City schools is not as bad as, and I know we talked about this last week, Jen. It's not the Q-tip all the way up to the brain. Now it's just around the outer nostril. But we talked about with children with special needs, especially children on the spectrum, how jarring that could be and how upsetting it could be to them. And there's a lot of complications in that kind of action. I mean, what if the person administering the test doesn't know what they're doing? But I don't want to get too far afield here. This testing without a parent's consent, I think, is the most abominable thing that could be done. And I think that for parents right now, your conversation needs to be with your school principal. Because here's what I believe truly, is that if we are all silent, then it is going to be done to us. If we decide to speak in a big group, at a rally, at a protest, at a whatever, the mayor and the governor are anesthetized with it, right? There's so many rallies, they don't care. Lawsuits, and I know, Jen, you'll talk a little bit about the lawsuit that you're involved in now. There's a lawsuit every day for every group, everywhere. And we know that the Archdiocese has a lawsuit against the city, and they lost twice. And that's the Archdiocese, okay, who had a lawsuit because their schools and churches were closed down in the red and yellow zones in Brooklyn, even though they didn't have any cases of COVID. And even though the judge agreed with everything they had to say, denied them twice. Okay, so the Archdiocese has been shut down. So what good is another lawsuit? It just costs money, and it drives everybody crazy. If you have a conversation with your principal, and there's no better way to have a conversation with your principal than writing a letter, writing a note, demanding a Zoom meeting for all the parents in the school with the principal, something. Have that conversation with that principal, because that principal can then go back and make changes where he or she can, or bring the information to the Board of Education, superintendent, or anybody else, and also have conversations with the teachers. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to villainize our teachers or our principals. We want to empower them. We want to empower them to take care of our kids. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, we are leaving the good health and the education of our children to them. So let's make enemies with them. Let's make advocates. Let's be their advocates and our kids' advocates. Let's have those conversations with the principal. And if anybody from any of the Facebook boards are watching right now, please, that's what I beg of you to do. Touch base with your principals. And if your PTAs haven't met yet, push your PTAs to meet on Zoom and offer to host. And I'll offer to host if they need a Zoom platform. But let's have those conversations and let's get it on the ground floor level, not up here where, all you're going to do is get press and they're going to go home. Who cares? Let's do it down here where we can make a difference. So I'm sorry, I speechified on that one. So talk to us about the lawsuit that you are participating in.
Yes. Okay. So I am partnered with a very large grassroots Facebook group called New York Parents and Teachers Against Distance Learning. And what they have just started is called the Noise Campaign, Normalization of In-School Education. That is the acronym for NOISE. And we are happy to announce that we have already started serving our papers to various districts and regions of New York. And what we are saying is that we are challenging the unlawful, I did write this down just so I was accurate. We are challenging the unlawful and unconstitutional measures put in place by New York State in response to COVID-19, and we are asking for them to be lifted.
Okay. So
So,
that would mean if you won the lawsuit, schools would have to open 5 days.
yes. So, and we are on the lawsuit also take under the umbrella of the big issue of what I just outlined. We are discussing how children are not receiving what we call a FAPE, a free and appropriate education. And our special needs kiddos are not receiving the services the way they are supposed to be legally on their IEPs, the individualized education plans. So those are some of the fine points of the lawsuit. And if any of your audience would like to add your name to the lawsuit, it is so simple to do. You go to the Facebook site, New York Parents and Teachers Against Distance Learning, and just send the admin a note stating that you want to be part of this lawsuit, and you give her your information and your name goes on the suit. We're not looking for any sort of financial compensation. That's not what's happening here. And these, angel lawyers that we have are doing this pro bono. So
Well, give them a plug. Who's doing it? What's the name of the law firm?
honestly, the law firm just changed, so I don't have the new name because they just switched because the new attorney is doing it pro bono, and I was just notified of this. However, I can get that information to you.
Yeah. When you get it, just type it into
Sure.
into the comments section so that our people can see. In Staten Island, Mark Fonte and Lou Gellermino have been our angel lawyers, along with Ron Castorina. They have all been doing pro bono work for our restaurants and for all of our lawsuits. So we're going to give them a plug. Mark Fonte, Lou Gellermino, and Ron Castorina, who have been running for judge as well. And when Jen gets the name of the new law firm, she'll put it in there. And we urge everyone, these are the type of people that we need in our community that come when they're needed and they don't, shake you down for money. And so when we need a lawyer and we have money to pay, we should all, use these people so that they come back and help us.
I do want to say there is a GoFundMe page on the Facebook page, but they're just collecting some money to cover the costs of filing and things like that. So if anybody feels like they want to contribute to that, $5, $10, whatever you can do, that's just covering some of their clerical costs. But yeah,
They add up. The clerical costs add up, even for a simple lawsuit. Just to file the paperwork, it could be up to about $1,000 to file the lawsuit paperwork on lawsuits. So yeah, if anybody wants to be part of it and wants to donate $5, please do what Jen said and do
Mhm.
that. So Jen, so leave our viewers. We got just about a minute left. Um, what thought do you want to leave in the minds of our parents out there when it comes to helping their children and advocating for them?
Hmm. I want people to know that perfection is not necessary, okay? And that you will figure out your new normal and it will be okay. You will be okay.
That, that's a fantastic statement that to leave people with. Jamie Ann just joined us, and I know that Jamie Ann is a terrific advocate for her children and children in education. And she says this lawsuit needs to advocate for medical freedom because the in-school COVID testing and now in-school vaccination for distribution delegated by Governor Cuomo this past weekend. Yeah, that's a scary thing. The vaccinations. She actually she's putting up a link so people can access the ABC News uh, article. So let's quickly talk about that. These vaccinations. For lots of parents, even before COVID, vaccinations were a problem with MMR vaccinations because there are certain children that shouldn't have them. Their doctors, their pediatricians do not feel that they should have them and that they should be able to, have immunity or get herd immunity because they think that their response to vaccination is worse than the health of the vaccination will give. And I know they're called anti-vaxxers, and they were struck a blow in the state in that for a long time there was a religious exemption, and now that religious exemption has been removed. Do you have anything to say to parents who might be frustrated, Jen, because they can't get their children back in school because they refuse to take any vaccine?
Again, I think it's a personal choice. Um, I know before I put a vaccine in my own son, I would want it studied for a while. I would want to see some time pass. Um, I think it's a personal choice, and I think that people need to go with their gut. Go with your mother and father gut. I know it's a very hard topic, and we're also going to have to see how it plays out if it becomes mandated to return to school or mandated to even leave your house. I
Right?
mean, but again, always start with your internal feelings about it. And my internal feelings tell me that I want to see it studied for a while. I don't need 10 years to see it studied, but I think for me, I would want to see it out for at least a year before I considered giving it to my son. So if that means I have to homeschool him for that long, then it is what it is. But
Well, that's good advice. I'm one of those that I'd volunteer to take the vaccine because I would want to do what I could to help the community because I'm of an age, right? I'm 57 years old. My children are raised. My grandson is a teenager now. I've lived a good life. I'll try it if it's going to help, the seniors and the kids. I'll try it, and you can, if I grow a third eye, I grow a third eye. Okay, I'm fine. um, but I'm one of those that would do it. But I'm with you though. I don't know how I would feel about giving it to my grandson or giving it to my child. I'd want it first, and I want to see how it works. I get my flu shot. I get my pneumonia shot. I do those things because I turned that age where you have to do those things. But for kids, I have to tell you, I so supported the religious exemption and the medical exemption. I understand it, and I think that you, as a parent, have the right to decide your children's destiny. And we do live in a society, but that doesn't mean that everybody gets to tell you what to do. You get to do. You're still free, and you have to protect your family first. So, Jamie, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you very much. I want to ask one more thing before I let you go, Jen. So now, for those parents that anti-vaxxers or whomever that choose now to homeschool or choose to not keep their kids enrolled in school, how do you feel about education pods that have been springing up where parents, take bring a tutor in and the kids, get together and have these education pods? Have any of your clients been part of that or have you heard anything about it? So,
I love it. I love that people are thinking outside of the box of public education. I encourage it. Do it. It's okay. Um, the learning pods are just one of so many options. And a lot of people think that options to public school are expensive. That's not that's not the truth. There are some very frugal options that are just as good. But that's another note, I want to leave on too, is to tell people to feel comfortable to look outside the box of public school. There are so many great options. The homeschooling, it's so funny. I've talked to John Tobacco and Frankie Morano about this and have told them how my son and I cried the first week of homeschooling before we met the teacher. And I didn't think it was going to work, and neither did my son. And then all of a sudden, we weren't crying as much, and it's turning out to be a marvelous experience with a lot of support, but it is.
you just have to organize your life, right? I mean, that's what we found at home is that we've organized our life around it. And I understand that not everybody can. So if you're not someone who can organize your life to homeschool and you need to put your child in school, nobody is condemning you or judging you. But there are other options. Even if you choose to homeschool and it's not you being the person who's homeschooling, there's what Jen's saying is there's other things that you can use, other ways to do it. And so just explore it and don't be so frightened because I'll guarantee you something. I've been in government for 20 years and I work for governors, mayors, and presidents. And I could tell you something. If your child misses a test or doesn't pass something this year or doesn't do something this year, he or she will not be flunked out or left back. You as a parent can advocate. This is the craziest year there ever was.
Oh, yeah.
You just teach your kid what you need and want your kid to know. My kid now knows how to cook for himself. He knows how to wash laundry.
Bravo.
He knows how to build a deck because he's been helping his grandfather build a deck.
Great.
He knows how to sign his name in cursive, which the school didn't teach him. I had to teach him at 15 years old. But these are the little side things that he got to learn because he's been learning at home. So there's other options. I'm going to leave. Jamie's our last comment. It's unfortunate that we would have to look for other options because our property taxes pay for public schools and their services. Just because it's public school doesn't mean it's free. That's why it's so sad that we are paying taxes on schools that we aren't allowed to use to its full extent.
Yes.
You're right, Jamie. Nobody says that you're wrong. The only thing that we do know is the true only way, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get criticized, but I'm going to say the true only way to get Cuomo de Blasio's attention to have our kids go back to public school is if we disenroll every single child from school. Disenroll them from school because you know what? Then they won't get the federal dollars. They're playing a game right now, and our kids are there playing. And they want the feds to come in, and they want money for the coffers, not just because of the COVID crisis, but because we have a huge budget deficit. Cuomo said $50 billion. Okay, $50 billion is our budget deficit because they mishandled this. Because it should have been 2 weeks and then get everything rocking and rolling. But they didn't want 2 weeks and everything rocking and rolling. What was the 2 weeks for? So that the health community could get their legs underneath them and we could figure out what to do. But they didn't do it. They wanted to play a game. Now the game has backfired on them. Mm-hmm. So the only way to get them to do our bidding is if we disenroll our kids. Is everybody in public education going to do that? Jamie, no, they won't. And there's no way to win this game with them. They have literally destroyed our state and our city. Period. And we all have to face that. We're not going to see it this year. We're going to see it next year. We have to rise up as taxpayers and take control of our own destiny. And that's why why Jen is on the show right now. She's helping to give people the information they need to be prepared to educate their children, not just this year, but maybe even further into the future in this quagmire that we're in now. So, Jamie, I agree with you. Money does talk, but we don't have that ability unless everybody's going to stop paying their taxes. We don't have that ability. And that might be, you might have a tax uprising, who knows? But as of right now, what the most important thing is to take away some of the tension from the parents and to give a peaceful kind of learning environment for the kids because they didn't ask for it. They didn't ask for it. And we can't lose our economic base and we can't lose our citizens of New York. So Jen was here today to help us. Jen, I hope you'll come back again.
I would love to.
Great, because we're going to need you. As this goes on, we're going to need you more and more. Jamie, you're my kind of gal. So you and I will talk offline and we'll get our swords and our shields and we'll figure out how to do this battle. Let me tell you something. Jen's not so bad either. She's a warrior. So we'll get Jen involved.
Don't make me mad. This seems nice, but don't make me mad.
Yes, Jamie wants to know if she can have your contact. I guess you could find her on Facebook and message her.
Yeah, absolutely. Under Jennifer Boer Cuevas. Just go to Facebook. Okay. I keep it simple. Facebook.
Yeah, everybody Facebook. Thank you, Jen, so very much. Thank you for all your comments today, everybody. On Friday, we have Colleen Mahoney, and we're going to talk about the fact that people have been posting and getting banned from Facebook. She's still banned. It's been more than 4 weeks now, and she didn't even share anything that was so bad. So George and I will be talking to Colleen Mahoney. We'll see you all at 2 o'clock on Friday. Jen, we'll have you back again. Thanks, honey.
Thank you.
Okay. We are going out.